I still remember the moment when everything collapsed, not with a scream or a thunderclap, but with the ordinary sound of water running in the sink. The evening light was falling through the curtains in thin golden lines as I rinsed the last plate from dinner. The smell of soap clung to my hands, and I was humming a tune I did not even realize until the humming stopped. Because that was when Adrian walked into the kitchen. He did not look like my son in that instant. His arms were crossed tight against his chest, his jaw set hard, and his eyes colder than I had ever seen. For one foolish second, I thought maybe he was going to tell me something good. Maybe he had finally gotten a job, maybe he had come to thank me for carrying the weight of bills these past months, maybe he even wanted to surprise me with news of some hope. That was the kind of mother I was, always wanting to believe the best. But when he opened his mouth, hope turned to ash. "Mom, we need to talk," he said. His voice was flat, sharp, the way a manager might fire an employee. I dried my hands with the towel hanging by the oven. My heart lifted in nervous anticipation, still desperate to believe. "Sure," I said softly. "What is it?" He did not look at me. He stared past me, his eyes fixed somewhere on the wall as if I was nothing but an inconvenience between him and his goal. Then he delivered the blow. "Celeste's parents are moving in. You need to move out." The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp, slicing me open before I could even grasp them. "Move out?" My voice cracked as I repeated it. "What do you mean? This is my house." He shrugged, like it was nothing, like my entire life, my sacrifices, my blood and sweat poured into these walls meant no more than dust. "Not anymore, Mom. We have decided. It makes more sense for them to be here. You will figure something out." I stared at him, waiting for the joke to reveal itself, waiting for the boy I raised to break into laughter and say he was only teasing. But there was no laughter, only the silence of betrayal. "Adrian," I whispered, gripping the edge of the counter for strength. "You cannot be serious." His mouth twisted into a smirk that looked foreign on his face, a smirk that belonged to someone who had already decided to hurt me. "I am dead serious. Go stay with a friend." Or his eyes hardened, steel on steel, "Go to hell." I do not care, the air left my lungs. My chest constricted so tightly I thought my heart would stop. "Why?" I managed to ask. "Because this is our family now," he said, his chin lifting. "Celeste's family. We are building our future here. You are old. You will be fine. Old." That word pierced deeper than all the others. Old and unwanted. As if my years of sacrifice were nothing more than a burden to him. Before I could speak, before I could gather the shattered pieces of myself, Celeste drifted into the doorway. She had a wine glass in one hand, her phone in the other, her eyes never lifting from the screen. A smile curved her lips, sharp and victorious. "Is she still here?" she asked, her tone dripping contempt. Adrian did not answer her. He just turned his cold eyes back to me. "Start packing tonight." The taste of betrayal filled my mouth like poison. My mind screamed at me to protest, to fight, to remind him that this house was built by my hands after his father died, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. But my body refused to move. I stood there frozen, watching Celeste lean lazily against the doorframe, sipping her wine as if my humiliation were nothing more than entertainment. "Do not make this harder than it needs to be," she said, her eyes never leaving her phone. Her voice was casual, almost bored, but every syllable dripped with cruelty. I swallowed the scream rising in my throat, not in front of them. I would not give them that satisfaction. Instead, I drew in a slow breath and allowed myself a smile, small and cold, a smile that surprised even Adrian. "Fine," I said quietly, my voice calm even though my insides were burning. "I will leave." Celeste laughed lightly, her smirk widening. "Good decision." I walked past them, my steps heavy but steady. Adrian did not reach for me, did not call my name, did not even look my way. The boy I had raised was gone, replaced by a man I no longer recognized. As I reached the stairs, I heard his voice, firm and final. "Make sure she is out by tomorrow. Tomorrow." After years of double shifts, sleepless nights, and endless sacrifice. Tomorrow was all the time I was worth. My hand gripped the railing until my knuckles turned white. I lifted my chin, forcing myself to keep walking. Each step felt like it carried the weight of a lifetime. Each stair whispered memories of laughter, of first steps, of birthdays and bedtime stories. And now, betrayal echoed louder than all of them. They thought they had won. They thought I was powerless. But they had no idea what lived inside me. Not yet. I reached the top of the stairs and paused at the landing. The walls seemed to close in on me, every photograph, every mark on the paint whispering fragments of my life. There was the dent from when Adrian had kicked a ball too hard inside the house. There was the faded frame that once held my wedding photo before I moved it to my room after his father passed away. Everything around me carried a memory, and now it all belonged to someone else, or so they believed. I opened the door to my bedroom and stepped inside. The air felt heavier here, as if the room itself knew what was happening. I closed the door quietly and leaned against it, my hands trembling. For a long moment, I simply stood there, listening to the faint sound of laughter drifting up from downstairs. Their laughter. It crawled under the door and into my bones, cruel and mocking. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hurl every memory at them like stones, to force Adrian to remember who I was, what I had done, how much I had given. But instead I sank down onto the edge of the bed, pressing my hands hard into my lap until my knuckles turned white. My chest ached. My throat burned. But no tears came, not yet. My gaze drifted toward the closet where an old suitcase waited in the shadows. I had not touched it in years. It felt almost symbolic, like pulling it out would be admitting defeat. My hands shook as I dragged it into the light, the zipper stiff with age. When it finally opened, the sound was louder than it should have been, a sound of endings. I began folding clothes with clumsy fingers. A shirt, a sweater, a scarf that still smelled faintly of laundry soap. Each piece carried memories I was not ready to surrender. When I lifted the small photo frame of my late husband, my hands trembled so badly I almost dropped it. His smile looked back at me, the smile that once gave me courage. I whispered his name, wishing he could tell me what to do, wishing he could stand beside me now. But only silence answered. The laughter downstairs grew louder, sharper. Celeste's voice rang clear through the ceiling. Yes, Mom, it is all ours now. Finally, ours. The word burned like acid through my chest. My grip on the photo frame tightened until I feared it might shatter. How quickly they had claimed everything I had built, how easily they erased me. I shoved the frame into the suitcase, then grabbed more clothes, stuffing them inside without folding. Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to let them fall. Not now, not here, not in front of them. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a message from Linda, my oldest friend. How are you holding up? I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keys. How could I explain that my only child had just thrown me out of my own home? That the boy I raised had chosen another family over me? My throat closed. I set the phone back down without answering. I zipped the suitcase and stood, my legs heavy as stone. I looked around the room one last time, letting my eyes linger on every detail. The curtains I sewed myself. The tiny crack in the mirror from when Adrian was a child and threw a toy too hard. My life was woven into these walls, and now I was being erased from them. Dragging the suitcase behind me, I descended the stairs. My feet felt like they carried the weight of centuries. From the living room, I could hear Celeste again. Make sure she does not take anything that belongs to us. My nails dug into the handle of the suitcase. Adrian said nothing to correct her. He just let her claim everything as hers. When I reached the bottom step, Celeste was waiting. She stood with her arms crossed, her smile smug and cruel, a glass of wine balanced carelessly in her hand. Leaving so soon? She asked, her voice syrupy with mockery. I looked at her, then at Adrian. He would not even meet my eyes. My throat ached with 1,000 words I wanted to say, but I swallowed them all. Instead, I lifted my chin and gave a small smile, cold and unyielding. Yes, I said quietly. I am leaving. Celeste tilted her head, her smirk widening. Good. We will send the rest of your things if we find any more. My heart splintered, but my face remained calm. I walked past her slowly, each step searing itself into my memory. I opened the front door, and the cool night air rushed against my face like a slap. For one fragile second, I almost turned back, almost begged, almost pleaded with my son to remember me. But then I remembered his voice, sharp and merciless. Go to hell, I do not care. No, there would be no begging. I walked to my car, the wheels of the suitcase rumbling against the driveway. My hands trembled as I lifted it into the trunk. I sat in the driver's seat, my fingers clenched around the steering wheel, my breath uneven. The lights of the house glowed behind me, flickering through the windows like a cruel reminder of all I had lost. I whispered into the darkness. You really did it, Adrian. You really threw me out. My throat burned as the words left my lips, and for a moment I thought I would break apart completely. But then my phone buzzed again, lighting up with a name that steadied me. Lisa. I did not answer. Not yet. Instead, I stared at the name, and a slow, bitter smile curved my lips. Lisa was not just a friend. She was my lawyer. And she knew secrets Adrian and Celeste had no idea about. The house behind me glowed like a fortress I had lost, but deep inside, a flame flickered. They thought they had broken me. They thought I was powerless. They had no idea what was coming. Tomorrow, everything would change. I did not drive away immediately. I sat in the car with the engine running, my hands clamped on the steering wheel, staring at the empty road stretching into the night. My chest heaved as if I had run for miles, but I had not moved an inch. The lights of the house glowed behind me, sharp against the darkness, taunting me like a cruel reminder of everything I had just lost. I wiped at my face, unsure if the wetness was sweat or tears. Maybe both. My whole body trembled, caught between fury and grief. The boy I had carried, the boy I had raised alone after his father died, had just turned me into a stranger in my own home. And the woman he married, her smile was carved into my memory like a scar. I whispered to myself as if saying it aloud would make it real. "You really did it, Adrian. You really told me to leave." For a moment, I thought I would break right there. I thought the weight of it would crush me before I could even pull out of the driveway. But then my phone buzzed again on the passenger seat. The screen lit up with a single name, Lisa. I stared at it, my lips trembling into a bitter smile. Lisa was not just a friend. She was my lawyer. She was the person I had called months ago when I started to suspect that Celeste's questions about my finances were not innocent. When Adrian suddenly spoke about the house as if he had built it himself, something inside me had shifted. That was when I called Lisa. "Help me protect what is mine," I had told her. And she did. So when Adrian and Celeste laughed tonight, believing they had won, the truth was they were sitting inside a house that did not legally belong to them at all. They were trespassing in a property owned by Lisa Torres, my quiet, brilliant friend who had tucked the papers safely in her office, away from curious eyes. The buzzing stopped, then started again. Finally, I swiped to answer. "You okay?" Lisa's calm voice slipped through the line like a hand reaching into the storm. I let out a shaky breath. "He did it," I whispered. "He told me to leave. He said Celeste's family was moving in." There was silence, then a low chuckle. "Well, that is going to be a problem for them." I leaned back in the seat, staring up at the night sky through the windshield. "They think they broke me," I murmured. "Good," Lisa said firmly. "Let them think that. Tomorrow morning I will make the call." My heart beat harder. I mean they will have 72 hours to vacate. No extensions, no excuses. A strange calm washed over me, heavy and cold but steady. For the first time that night, I did not feel powerless. I felt prepared. "Thank you, Lisa," I whispered. "Do not thank me yet," she said. "This is only the beginning." When the call ended, I sat in the silence of the car, staring at the house glowing in the distance. My fingers tightened on the wheel and my lips curved into a smile that tasted of steel. They thought they had destroyed me, but I was still here. And tomorrow, the game would change. I finally shifted the car into gear and drove into the night. The roads were quiet, lined with shadows. My heart ached with every mile, but my mind sharpened with resolve. I was heading to Linda's house, the only friend besides Lisa who had stood by me through everything. By the time I arrived, the clock read close to midnight. Linda was waiting at the door, her hair tied back, her eyes full of worry. She opened her arms before I even stepped out of the car. "Zaimna," she whispered, pulling me close. What happened? I could not answer at first. My throat locked tight. The warmth of her embrace only reminded me of the cold rejection I had just endured. Finally, I forced the words out. "He told me to leave." Her grip tightened around me. "That boy," she said, shaking her head. "I do not understand him anymore." "Neither do I whispered. She helped me carry the suitcase inside, her little guest room already made up for me. The walls were painted pale yellow, soft and welcoming, but I still felt like an exile. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my folded hands. For years, I thought this day would never come. For years, I believed my sacrifices meant something. But tonight, I was nothing more than an obstacle in my son's new life. Linda touched my arm gently. "You can stay here as long as you need." "Do not worry about anything." I nodded, but the words barely touched me. My mind was still back in that house, still hearing Adrian's voice, still tasting the bitterness of Celeste's smirk. When Linda left me to rest, I lay down, but sleep never came. My body was exhausted, but my mind kept running in circles, replaying his words. "Go to hell, I do not care." I pressed my hands against my chest, feeling the ache spread like fire. For 29 years, I gave everything I had to him. Double shifts, sleepless nights, holidays spent working so he could have presents under the tree. And in return, he cast me out without a second thought. Tears pricked my eyes, but I forced them back. Not tonight, not anymore. I had promised myself I would not cry in front of them, and I would not cry now. Instead, I whispered into the dark room, a vow only I could hear. "This is not over." The clock ticked past 2 in the morning before my eyes finally closed. My dreams were restless, filled with shadows and voices, but beneath it all, one thought anchored me. Tomorrow, everything begins. The morning came heavy and slow. I opened my eyes to the pale yellow walls of Linda's guest room, unfamiliar and almost too gentle. The ceiling was quiet, the hum of traffic faint in the distance. For a few seconds I forgot where I was. Then it all came crashing back. Adrian's voice, Celeste's smirk, the weight of the suitcase I had dragged through the night. My throat was dry. I sat up slowly, staring at the clock on the nightstand. It was just past 8. I wanted to pull the blanket over my head and disappear, but instead I forced myself to stand. Every step felt like a decision. I dressed in a simple gray sweater and black slacks from the suitcase. The fabric smelled of home, of the closet I had left behind. My hands lingered on each fold, my chest aching, but I reminded myself, this was not the time for memories. This was the time to act. I walked into Linda's kitchen where she was already making coffee. The smell filled the room, warm and bitter. She turned when she saw me, her eyes soft. "You did not sleep, did you?" I shook my head. "Not much." She slid a cup toward me. "Drink, it will help." I wrapped my hands around the mug, though I had no intention of drinking. My stomach was too tight, my thoughts too restless. "What are you going to do now?" she asked gently. For a moment, I could not answer. Then I lifted my eyes to hers. "I am not finished." Her brows knit in confusion, but she said nothing. She knew me well enough to know there were things I was not ready to explain. I stepped outside, the crisp morning air biting at my skin. The street was lined with trees swaying softly in the wind. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. The world looked the same, but I was not. Something had hardened inside me during the night, something I did not recognize but welcomed. I drove until I found a quiet cafe near Lisa's office. It was nearly empty, just a couple of students with laptops and an old man reading a newspaper by the window. I slid into a corner booth and ordered a black coffee I knew I would not drink. The cup arrived, steaming, dark. I wrapped my hands around it anyway, staring into the liquid as if it might hold the answers I needed. My phone buzzed on the table. A message from Lisa. "It is done." My lips curved into a slow smile. My fingers trembled as I typed back, "Thank you." I could see it all so clearly in my mind, even though I was not there. The knock on the door. Sharp, deliberate, impossible to ignore. Celeste opening it with that fake sweet smile, her phone still in her hand. "Yes, can I help you?" And then the calm, firm voice of the lawyer Lisa had sent. "Are you Mrs. Cortez?" "Yes, I am here to deliver an official notice. This property is legally owned by Lisa Tours. You and your family are occupying it without consent. You have 72 hours to vacate." I pictured Celeste's laugh. Loud, brittle, the kind of laugh people use when they are cornered. There must be some mistake, she would snap. "This is our home," but the lawyer would not flinch. "No mistake. Failure to comply will result in law enforcement involvement." I sat there in the cafe, my smile bitter but steady. For months, they had whispered behind my back, plotted, believed they were smarter than me. And now the law stood at their door. My phone buzzed again. Lisa was calling. I answered quickly. "Is he there?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Lisa chuckled softly. "He is there." And Celeste's voice is shaking now. I almost feel bad for her. "Almost. And Adrian?" I asked, my throat tightening around his name. "He just walked in," Lisa said. He grabbed the papers out of my guy's hand like they were burning him. He is yelling now. Something about mistakes and calling his lawyer. I let out a bitter laugh. "His lawyer? He does not even have a job." Lisa laughed too, low and cold. "He is trying to call you, by the way." He has been pacing, phone in his hand. Want to guess what he will say? As if on cue, my phone lit up with his name. Adrian. The sight of it made my chest ache. For a second, a part of me wanted to answer. To hear him say, "I am sorry, Mom, I was wrong, come home," but I knew better. His voice would not hold apology. It would hold anger, entitlement, blame. He would twist everything until I was the villain. I let the call ring out. Not today. When I hung up with Lisa, I stayed in that cafe for a long time. People came and went, their laughter floating through the air while my coffee grew cold and untouched. My hands were steady now. My heart was too. They thought they had thrown me out with nothing. They thought they had taken my dignity. But today, they were the ones packing boxes. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I was back in control. The phone lit up again. Adrian's name flashed across the screen like a wound that refused to close. This time, I picked it up. "Hello?" My voice came out flat, steady. "Mom," he snapped. No warmth, no hesitation, only rage. "What the hell did you do?" I closed my eyes, letting his anger wash over me like a wave I refused to drown in. "What do you mean?" "Do not play dumb," he shouted so loud I had to pull the phone away. "A lawyer just showed up saying this house is not ours, that it belongs to some Lisa person. Is this a joke?" I gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles ached. "It is not a joke," I said calmly. There was silence, just his heavy breathing. Then he hissed, "You did this. You went behind my back and took my house away from me." "Your house?" I repeated, my voice sharp. "Adrian, this house was mine long before Celeste even knew your name." "Ours," he snapped. "It was ours. We were planning a future here and you ruined it. Do you even care what you have done to us? My lips trembled with fury. What I have done to you. I whispered, my throat tight. Yesterday you stood in my kitchen and told me to get out. You said Celeste's family was more important than me. And now you dare accuse me of stealing? He cursed under his breath. You owe me. I am your son. That word broke something inside me. I saw flashes of his childhood, his tiny hand gripping mine on his first day of school, his laughter when I baked his favorite cake, the nights I stayed awake sewing costumes for him. And now, after all of it, this was who he had become. I owe you nothing, I said, my voice steel. You made your choice when you let her treat me like dirt. You made your choice when you told me to leave my own home. The line went quiet for a heartbeat. Then his voice came back, harder than stone. Fine, you want a war, you have got one. The line went dead. I sat in that booth, staring at the black screen in my hand. My chest ached, my throat burned, but no tears came. Not anymore. I whispered to myself, you have no idea what is coming, Adrian. Something dark and steady rooted itself in me then. Not revenge, not hate, something sharper. Resolve. They thought they could erase me. But they were about to learn a lesson. You do not destroy a woman who has already survived hell. The day after the call with Adrian felt like the first day of a storm. I woke up in Linda's guest room, the pale morning light streaming through the curtains, and I knew nothing would be the same again. The weight in my chest was different now. It was not grief anymore, not entirely. It was colder, steadier, like a stone pressed deep inside me. I sat on the edge of the bed, my bare feet touching the rug. My phone buzzed on the nightstand again and again with messages I did not open. I already knew who it was. Adrian, his name flashing over and over like an alarm that refused to shut off. I could hear his voice even without answering. Angry. Accusing. Blaming me for the mess he and Celeste had created. But the truth was, this was never my mess. This was theirs. I pulled on a jacket and drove across town to Lisa's office. Her building stood tall and sleek, the kind of place that looked unshakable. I walked through the glass doors and into the quiet lobby, the heels of my shoes clicking on the marble floor. The receptionist nodded at me, and within minutes Lisa appeared, her hair perfectly in place, her calm eyes like anchors in a storm. You are early, she said, offering me a faint smile. I could not sleep, I admitted. She gestured for me to follow her, and soon we were seated in her office, sunlight pouring in from the wide windows. Papers were spread across her desk, neatly stacked, every line of text a weapon in this quiet war. They got the notice, I said softly. Oh, they got it, she replied, leaning back in her chair. And they are not happy. I laughed bitterly. I can imagine. Lisa studied me for a moment. You are handling this better than most would. I shrugged, though the truth was my insides were still raw. I cannot afford to fall apart, I whispered. Not anymore. Lisa's eyes softened. Do you want to see the documents again? I nodded. She slid a folder across the desk. My hands trembled as I opened it, my eyes scanning the familiar words, the transfer of property, the notarized signatures, the date that sealed it all. I remembered the night I signed those papers months ago. I had been lying awake, unable to sleep, haunted by a gnawing feeling that something was wrong. Celeste had been asking too many questions about the house. Adrian had been different too, his tone sharper whenever the subject of money came up. It was then that I picked up the phone and called Lisa. I need to protect myself, I had told her, and she had helped me do exactly that. Now, as I ran my fingers along the edge of the folder, I felt a wave of gratitude for the woman sitting across from me. They think they have won, I whispered, but this house has not been mine for months. It has been yours. Lisa gave me a firm nod. Legally, yes, which means Adrian and Celeste are nothing more than squatters, and if they push this, the law is not on their side. A sharp satisfaction pulsed through me. They thought I was blind, powerless, weak. But I had seen their betrayal coming long before they ever threw me out. I had already taken the one thing they wanted most and placed it far beyond their reach. The smile that spread across my face was not soft, not warm, it was cold. A smile that tasted like survival. Lisa leaned forward. You need to be ready. This will get messy. They will not surrender quietly. I nodded. I know. For a moment, silence filled the office. I looked out the window at the bustling streets below. People hurried by with their coffees, their briefcases, their plans for the day. None of them knew what was happening in this room. None of them knew the storm that was brewing in my life. And for the first time in a long time, I was not afraid of it. I turned back to Lisa. Let them fight. I am not running anymore. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. That is what I wanted to hear. When I stepped out of Lisa's office, the sunlight felt different on my skin. It was sharp, almost blinding, but it did not burn. It was as if the whole world had shifted slightly, tilted in my favor for the first time in years. I walked to my car with the folder still clutched in my hands, my steps firm. The papers inside were more than documents. They were armor. By the time I sat down in the driver's seat, my phone was buzzing again. Adrian's name filled the screen, vibrating with rage. I let it ring. A minute later, another call, then another. Each one unanswered. My silence was a weapon too, and I intended to use it. Instead, I drove back to the cafe from the day before. It felt like neutral ground, a place where I could watch the world move on while mine was caught in the middle of battle. I chose the same corner booth and ordered another black coffee. When the cup arrived, I wrapped my hands around it and waited. It did not take long. The phone lit up with Linda's name. I answered immediately. Her voice was rushed, breathless. "Zymna, you need to see this. What is it?" She sent me a link, and when I opened it, my stomach twisted. There on my screen was a Facebook post. Celeste's face smiled back at me, her hand resting on her stomach as if she were cradling a child that did not exist. The caption made bile rise in my throat. "My cruel mother-in-law kicked us out with a baby on the way. We have nowhere to go. How can someone be so heartless?" Below it were hundreds of comments, strangers clawing at me with their words. "How can a mother do this to her own son? Shame on her. Selfish old hag." My hands shook so violently, the phone almost slipped from my grip. She made me the villain. She turned the world against me with a single lie. "Do not read them," Linda urged. "It is not worth it," but I could not stop scrolling. Each insult cut deeper, each threat left a bruise I could not see but felt all the same. For a moment, doubt sank its claws into me. Maybe I had gone too far. Maybe I should have stayed quiet, accepted the humiliation, walked away with nothing. Was I really this monster they painted me as? Then I saw it. A single line buried in Celeste's post. "We were planning to fix the house and maybe even sell it to start our new life." Sell it? The blood drained from my face. They had not just wanted to live there, they had planned to take it all. To erase me completely and cash in on the very thing I had built with my own hands. My sadness burned away, replaced by something fiercer. Rage. I called Lisa immediately. She answered on the first ring, her tone calm as always. "You saw the post." "They were going to sell my house," I hissed, my voice shaking with fury. "They were going to steal everything." "I know," she said, her voice steady. "And that is exactly what we needed." That line is proof of intent. Fraud. This just made our case 10 times stronger. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone so tight my hand hurt. "Then let us finish this, Lisa. No more warnings, no more chances." "Then we move forward," she replied. "I will prepare the paperwork tonight." When I ended the call, I sat in silence for a long time. Around me, the cafe hummed with ordinary life, the sound of spoons clinking against cups, the low murmur of conversations. But inside me, something dark solidified. Celeste thought she had humiliated me. Adrian thought he had broken me, but they did not understand. I had been humiliated before. I had been broken before. And every time I got back up. Now I was not just standing again. I was coming for everything they thought they could take from me. I whispered into the air, the words tasting of iron. "You wanted a war, Celeste. You are about to get one." That night, I lay awake in Linda's guest room, my phone buzzing endlessly beside me. Adrian's messages poured in, shifting from rage to desperation, from insults to pleas, but I did not answer. My silence was louder than any words I could have spoken. When I finally drifted into sleep, I dreamed not of the past, but of the future. Of standing tall while they crumbled, of reclaiming everything they had tried to erase. And when I woke the next morning, I knew the war had truly begun. The morning of the third day arrived with a heaviness that clung to me like smoke. I had barely slept, my mind caught between anger and anticipation. Linda had tried to convince me to stay offline, to avoid the poison of Celeste's posts, but curiosity gnawed at me until I opened my phone again. And there it was, another picture. Adrian standing on the porch of the house, his arm around Celeste as she leaned into him with exaggerated fragility. Her hand rested on her stomach again, the phantom child she had invented. The caption read, "Still no compassion, still no roof over our heads. Please pray for us and our baby." The comments poured in like acid rain, strangers offering money, others calling me a monster, some even sending threats, their words violent and reckless. For a moment, shame pressed down on me, so heavy I could not breathe. But then I saw Adrian's eyes in the photo, not grief, not despair, defiance. He looked almost proud standing there, as if humiliating me publicly was some kind of victory. That was when the shame lifted, burned away by something colder. Let them have their pity party, I thought. Soon the world would see the truth. Lisa called at noon. Her voice was sharp with quiet satisfaction. "The eviction order is official. If they do not leave by tomorrow, officers will escort them out." Relief spread through me, though it was tangled with dread. He will never forgive me for this, I whispered. Lisa's tone was calm. Zymna, he already made his choice. Stop looking for forgiveness where there is none. Her words hit me harder than I expected. My throat tightened, but I nodded even though she could not see me. You are right. Later that afternoon, Linda insisted we go for a walk. The sun was bright, the air cool, and the park was full of children chasing each other while their parents watched from benches. I watched them too, my chest aching. Once, not so long ago, Adrian had been one of those children. I used to sit on the grass and clap as he kicked a ball across the field, his laughter ringing through the air. Now he was a stranger wearing my son's face. Linda touched my arm gently. Stop blaming yourself, she said. You raised him. What he chooses to become now is on him. I wanted to believe her, but the guilt was a stubborn ghost. Still, I managed a small smile. Thank you for reminding me. That evening, as the sky turned red with sunset, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a video. My stomach twisted when I saw the thumbnail Celeste sitting on the porch of my house. I pressed play. Her eyes were wide and glossy, her voice trembling with false sorrow. We are victims, she said into the camera. Thrown out by someone who should have loved us. Adrian's own mother. And all because I am pregnant. What kind of woman does that? I slammed the phone down so hard Linda flinched. She picked it up and replayed the clip, shaking her head. She is clever, I admitted bitterly. She knows exactly how to make me look like a monster. Linda's lips tightened. Clever or not, lies cannot stand forever, but lies, I thought, often lasted long enough to cause real damage. The next morning, Lisa called again. Her voice carried the weight of news. They are refusing to leave. They are digging in. Of course they are, I muttered. So here is what we are going to do, she continued. If they want to play this out in public, we will give them a taste of it. But this time, with the truth, I frowned. What do you mean? She explained her plan, every detail sharp and deliberate. And as I listened, a slow, grim smile spread across my face. It was not just about the law anymore. It was about showing everyone who the real villains were. By the time she finished, my heart was pounding. Are you sure about this? Absolutely, Lisa said firmly. They wanted a stage. Let us give them one. When I ended the call, I stood in front of the mirror in Linda's hallway, staring at my reflection. My eyes looked different now, harder, colder, but alive. For months, I had been shrinking, bending, breaking under the weight of their betrayal. But not anymore. Celeste wanted a performance. She was about to get one. The morning air was sharp and cold when I stepped out of Linda's house. I had not slept more than a handful of hours, but adrenaline kept me upright. Lisa's plan echoed in my head like a steady drumbeat. Today, we stop playing defense. Today, we strike back. By the time I arrived at Lisa's office, she already had a stack of papers waiting. Legal documents, certified letters, copies of Celeste's very public lies. She slid one particular folder across the table toward me. Inside was the proof I had almost forgotten existed, medical records, or rather the absence of them. She is not pregnant, Lisa said flatly. There is no record, no appointments, nothing. I stared at the papers, my mouth dry. Part of me had known, of course, but seeing the truth printed in black and white was like having a curtain ripped open. Celeste had spun her biggest lie yet, and Adrian had swallowed it whole. What now? I asked quietly. Lisa leaned back in her chair, her hands folded neatly. Now we wait for the officers to arrive, and while they do their job, we will make sure the truth is impossible to ignore. Her calmness was like steel. It steadied me. When we pulled up near the house later that afternoon, my stomach twisted. The sight of it from a distance made my chest ache. My curtains, my garden, my porch, all of it hijacked by people who wanted me erased. But today it would end. A pair of police cars already waited at the curb. 2 officers stood by the gate, their posture firm, professional. One of them held a clipboard. I stayed in Lisa's car, watching from behind the tinted glass, my pulse hammering. Celeste appeared first. She stormed onto the porch, her voice shrill even from where I sat. You can't do this. This is our home. I am pregnant, for God's sake. The officer remained unmoved. He handed her the papers, his voice calm but unyielding. You were served with notice. You ignored it. You need to vacate the premises immediately. Her face twisted with rage. This is harassment. She is doing this to me because she hates me. She pointed toward the street, her finger shaking, as though she knew I was there even behind the tinted glass. And then Adrian appeared. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot. He snatched the papers from Celeste's hands and ripped them in half, tossing them into the yard like scraps. This is a joke, he shouted. You can't throw us out of my own house. My house, I thought bitterly. The officer did not flinch. Sir, failure to comply will result in arrest. The words seemed to cut through the air. For the first time, Adrian's bravado faltered. He looked at Celeste, then at the officers, then back at the house. His jaw clenched, but his shoulders slumped. He knew. Deep down, he knew this was a battle he could not win. Celeste, however, was not finished. She clutched her stomach dramatically, her voice breaking into sobs. "Please, officer. Please don't put my baby at risk, I just need time." But the officer's expression did not soften. He had seen liars before. He had heard every plea in the book. "Ma'am, you need to leave now." From the safety of the car, I watched as boxes were dragged out, bags tossed carelessly onto the lawn. Neighbors began to gather, whispers floating through the air. I could feel their eyes on the scene, their curiosity sharp and merciless. Celeste's mask cracked when she noticed the stares. Her tears dried instantly, her face twisting with fury as she hissed at Adrian to do something. But Adrian was silent now, his hands buried in his pockets, his gaze fixed on the ground. Lisa leaned slightly toward me. "Do you want to step out, or would you rather stay here?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to walk up that driveway, to look Celeste in the eye as she lost everything she thought she had stolen. But another part of me knew that silence was its own kind of victory. Let them wonder. Let them choke on it. "I will stay," I whispered. We watched as the last of their things were piled onto the curb. Celeste's voice grew shrill again, but her words carried no weight now. The officers stood firm, the neighbors whispered louder, and Adrian stared at nothing. Finally, the door slammed shut behind them. My house, my home, was empty once more. The officers handed the keys to Lisa, who locked the door herself before slipping them into her bag. Then she walked back to the car and handed me a copy. "It is yours again," she said quietly. I closed my hand around the key, the metal cold against my skin. Relief flooded me, but it was tangled with sorrow. I had one, yes, but what had I truly gained? My house was back, but my son was gone. As we drove away, I glanced one last time at the curb. Adrian sat on a suitcase, his shoulders hunched, his head bowed. Celeste paced beside him, her phone pressed to her ear as she ranted to whoever would listen. They looked small, pitiful, exposed. And yet, instead of triumph, a strange emptiness settled in my chest. Linda called that evening. "I heard what happened," she said. "The whole neighborhood is talking. You did it, Zymna. You finally did it." I swallowed hard. "Yes, but it doesn't feel like victory." "Because you are still his mother," Linda replied gently. "And that part will always hurt." Her words stayed with me long after the call ended. That night, as I lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling and whispered into the darkness. "You wanted war, Adrian, but war doesn't end with victory. It ends with ruins." And I was afraid of what ruins would be left when this was over. The morning after the eviction felt eerily quiet. For the first time in weeks, I woke up without the sound of Celeste's laughter in my ears, without Adrian's sharp voice echoing through the halls. My house was mine again, or at least, legally secure in Lisa's hands, but the silence pressed against me like an accusation. I stood in the kitchen, the same kitchen where Adrian had told me to get out, and poured myself a cup of coffee. The smell filled the air, familiar and comforting, but my chest still ached. Victory was supposed to taste sweet. Instead, it tasted like ash. The news broke that afternoon. My phone buzzed endlessly with notifications, each one pulling me deeper into the pit Celeste had dug. A headline flashed across the screen: "Mother evicts pregnant daughter-in-law, family torn apart." I opened the article, and there she was again, Celeste, draped in tragedy, her face pale and tear-streaked, her hand protectively on her stomach. Adrian stood beside her, his arm tight around her shoulders, his expression grim. The reporter's words made my stomach turn. They were left homeless after a cruel betrayal. Celeste, expecting her first child, has spoken out against the woman who should have been her family, accusing her of heartless manipulation and greed. My coffee grew cold in my hand as I read on. There was no mention of the eviction notice, no mention of the forged lies, no mention of the truth, only her story. My phone rang. "Lisa, do not panic," she said the moment I answered. Her voice was steady, grounding. "I saw the article. It changes nothing legally, but it does mean we need to prepare for the next step." "The court," I whispered. "Yes," she replied. "Celeste isn't going to let this end here. She is already pushing for a lawsuit, claiming unlawful eviction and emotional distress. It is laughable, but it will still drag you through the mud if we are not careful." My hands tightened around the mug. "So it is not over." "It will not be over until they are stripped of every excuse," Lisa said firmly. "And we are going to do exactly that." That evening, Linda came over with takeout. She found me sitting at the dining table, the article still glowing on my phone screen. She set the bags down, pulled out 2 plates, and gave me a look that was both pity and warning. "You cannot let her win the public," she said. "People believe what they see, not what is true." "I know," I whispered, But how do you fight a lie that is dressed like truth? Linda poured me tea, her eyes never leaving mine. With patience, with evidence, and with people who refuse to be fooled. Her words stayed with me as the night deepened. I sat alone in the living room, the walls heavy with memories, and wondered if my patience would last long enough. The first court summons arrived 2 days later. A crisp envelope slid under my door, stamped with official seals. I held it in my hands for a long time before opening it, my fingers trembling. Inside were the accusations: unlawful eviction, emotional cruelty, financial manipulation. Each line more venomous than the last. "She is painting me as a monster," I told Lisa when I brought the papers to her office. "She is painting herself into a corner," Lisa corrected calmly. "And when the truth comes out, she will regret every word." I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. But the thought of standing in a courtroom, of facing Adrian's eyes while Celeste spun her lies, filled me with dread. The first hearing was scheduled for a Thursday. That morning I stood in front of the mirror for too long, adjusting the collar of my black dress, brushing invisible dust from my sleeves. I looked older, sharper, like a woman carved from stone. Maybe that was what I needed to be. Lisa picked me up, her calm presence filling the car. She briefed me on every detail as we drove, her voice crisp and steady. "Do not let Celeste provoke you. Do not look at the crowd. Focus on me and the judge. That is all that matters." The courthouse loomed ahead, its stone pillars tall and cold. As I walked up the steps, flashes exploded around me, photographers, their cameras clicking like gunfire. Questions were hurled in my direction. "Did you really kick out your pregnant daughter-in-law? How do you sleep at night?" I kept my eyes forward, my lips pressed tightly together. Silence was safer than any answer. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with whispers. Celeste was already seated, her outfit deliberately modest, her hair tied back, her face pale as porcelain. Adrian sat beside her, his arm protectively draped around her shoulders. For a moment my heart stuttered. He looked tired, older, the boy I had raised buried under layers of bitterness. He did not look at me, not once. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. The proceedings began. Celeste's lawyer stood first, his words slick and rehearsed. He painted a picture of cruelty, of a mother turning her back on her only son and his fragile, expecting wife. Each sentence twisted the knife deeper. I sat rigid, my nails digging into my palms. Beside me, Lisa scribbled notes calmly, her face unreadable. When it was her turn, she rose with a quiet authority that silenced even the whispers in the back rows. "My client acted well within her legal rights," Lisa began. "This property has been under my ownership since before these accusations were ever conceived. The eviction was not unlawful, it was necessary. And as for claims of pregnancy, there is no medical evidence to support them." Gasps rippled through the room. Celeste's face flushed, her hand flying to her stomach. Adrian stiffened beside her, his jaw clenching. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Is that true?" Celeste's lawyer stammered, flipping through his papers. We have testimony. Testimony is not evidence," Lisa cut in, her voice sharp as glass. "Where are the records, the appointments, the doctor's confirmation?" The silence that followed was deafening, and in that silence I felt it, the first crack in Celeste's mask. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of shuffling papers and the nervous cough of someone in the back row. Celeste's hand remained pressed dramatically against her stomach, her eyes shining with false tears. But the silence after Lisa's challenge was unbearable, stretching longer and longer until even the judge leaned forward. "Well," his voice cut through the stillness like a blade, "does your client have medical documentation to support her claim of pregnancy?" Celeste's lawyer cleared his throat. "We will submit it in due time, Your Honor." Lisa tilted her head, her smile cool. "Which is to say you have none. At present, there is no evidence to support the central claim of their case." The judge nodded once, making a note. Celeste squirmed in her seat, her lower lip trembling. She leaned toward Adrian, whispering something urgently. He stiffened, his shoulders tight, but he did not meet her eyes. I sat frozen, my hands clenched together in my lap. My heart wanted to leap, to celebrate the victory of that moment, but another part of me ached as I looked at my son. His face was pale, his jaw set, his gaze locked on the floor. He was crumbling, and yet he stayed chained to her side. The rest of the hearing blurred. Lisa dismantled their claims point by point, her words sharp but controlled, while Celeste's lawyer scrambled, stumbling over weak arguments. By the time the judge called for a recess, the tide had turned. Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed like vultures. Their voices rose in a chaotic chorus, questions thrown like daggers. "Mrs. Hicks, is your daughter-in-law lying about the pregnancy?" Do you have any regrets about the eviction? I kept my chin high and my lips sealed, pushing past them with Lisa at my side. Linda was waiting by the doors, her eyes wide with both pride and worry. You were brilliant in there, she whispered to Lisa. Lisa gave a tight nod. This is only the beginning. I barely heard them. My eyes had caught on a figure across the hallway. Adrian. He stood alone by the water fountain, his head bowed, his hands buried in his pockets. Celeste was nowhere in sight. For a moment I froze, my feet rooted to the ground. Then, before I could stop myself, I took a step toward him. Adrian, I said softly. His head snapped up. His eyes met mine, and for just a heartbeat I saw my son again. The boy who once begged me to watch his soccer games, who used to leave sticky notes on the fridge that read "Love you, Mom." But then his expression hardened, shutters slamming down over that fleeting glimpse. What do you want? His voice was low, tight with anger. My throat tightened. I want to understand why you let her twist everything this way, why you let her. Stop, he cut me off, his voice sharp enough to draw stares from the crowd. You don't get to blame her. You drove me out the second you decided to control everything. You never trusted me. You never believed I could make my own choices. The words hit harder than any slap. I swallowed, my chest burning. I trusted you with my life, Adrian. I gave you everything I had. And you chose her lies over my truth? His face reddened. Because her lies feel better than your truth ever did. The hallway fell silent. People stared. Even the reporters stopped shouting for a moment. I took a slow breath, fighting the trembling in my hands. One day you will see her for who she really is. And when that day comes, Adrian, I will still love you, but I won't save you. He flinched as if the words struck him. For a second, his eyes wavered, his lips parting as though he wanted to speak. But then Celeste appeared at the far end of the hall, her face flushed with fury. Adrian, she barked, marching toward us. Don't waste your time, she's just trying to manipulate you. He froze, caught between us. Then slowly he turned and walked toward her. I watched him go, my heart cracking in fresh places I did not know still existed. Lisa touched my arm. Do not let her win in your mind, she murmured. The law is already on your side. All she has left are theatrics. But the ache inside me whispered otherwise. All she had left was Adrian, and for now that was enough. The following weeks were a blur of hearings, filings, and whispered rumors spreading like wildfire. Celeste doubled down on her lies, clinging to the pregnancy story even as cracks widened. Each time Lisa demanded proof, they stalled, promising it would come soon. Soon never arrived. Neighbors who once believed her began to whisper doubt. Friends who had rushed to defend her online grew quiet. The comments on her posts shifted from blind sympathy to pointed questions. And Adrian, my poor Adrian, I saw the confusion in his eyes every time he entered the courtroom. He avoided looking at me, but his gaze lingered too long on Celeste, as though searching for the truth she refused to give. One afternoon, after a particularly brutal session where Celeste's lies unraveled under Lisa's calm interrogation, I stepped outside and found Linda waiting with open arms. I leaned into her embrace, the tears finally spilling down my cheeks. You're winning, she whispered. She's falling apart. I don't feel like I'm winning, I admitted, my voice breaking. I feel like I'm losing my son piece by piece. Linda stroked my hair like a mother would. Sometimes you have to let them break before they see the truth. He will come back to you. One day. I wanted to believe her. I prayed she was right. But as the sun dipped low in the sky, painting the courthouse steps in shadows, I knew the war was far from over. Celeste had lost ground in court, but she was not finished. And I could feel it. Her next move would be darker, sharper, desperate enough to cut us all. The trial stretched into its second month, each hearing a battlefield where Celeste spun new webs of deceit and Lisa cut through them with cold precision. The weight of it all pressed on me like a stone, but I endured, clinging to the belief that truth would eventually shine through. Then one morning, everything shifted. I was sipping coffee in my kitchen, the curtains drawn against the nosy stares of neighbors when my phone buzzed with a message. The sender's name froze my blood. Adrian. For weeks he had ignored me outside of court. He had spat his anger in the hallways, turned his back when I tried to meet his eyes. And now, suddenly, a message. Mom, is it true? She lying? My hands trembled so violently I almost dropped the phone. I read the words again and again, my heart hammering. He was asking me, not her, not the world, me. I typed slowly, afraid every letter might shatter the fragile bridge between us. What do you think, Adrian? Have you seen proof? Have you heard anything besides her words? The dots appeared, then vanished. Appeared again. Then finally his reply. She won't show me. Always says it's private. I don't know what to believe anymore. I pressed a hand against my chest, the ache almost unbearable. My boy was trapped, torn between the woman he thought he loved and the mother he had rejected. Before I could respond, another message came, longer this time. I just need you to tell me the truth. If she's lying, if she's been lying this whole time, I don't know what I'll do. I closed my eyes, tears stinging hot. Yes, Adrian, she's lying. She has been from the beginning. I would never lie to you about something like this. The silence that followed stretched for minutes. Each second felt like an eternity. Then finally, his reply arrived. Meet me, not at court, somewhere private. I agreed before fear could stop me. We chose a quiet diner on the edge of town, the kind of place where the booths were cracked and the coffee never stopped flowing. I arrived early, my nerves rattling. When he finally walked through the door, my breath caught. He looked thinner, older, shadows under his eyes. He slid into the booth across from me, his movement stiff. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he whispered, "Tell me everything." So I did. I told him about the documents, the missing records, the lies unraveling in court. I told him about the night I signed the house into Lisa's care, how I had seen Celeste's greed long before he had. I told him how much it broke me to watch him throw me out, but how much more it broke me to know she had poisoned him against me. His hands trembled as he gripped the edge of the table. His eyes darted around the diner, but always came back to mine. "She said you hated her," he muttered, "that you never wanted her around, that you only cared about yourself." I reached across the table, my hand covering his. He flinched, but he didn't pull away. "I only ever wanted to protect you, Adrian, even from her, especially from her." His throat worked as he swallowed hard. Then in a voice so low I almost missed it, he said, "I think I already knew, I just didn't want to admit it." The words cracked something inside me. Relief and sorrow tangled in my chest until I could barely breathe, but before I could speak, his phone buzzed. He looked down at the screen and his face twisted. "Celeste." He answered, his voice strained. "Yeah, I'm out. I just needed air." He paused, listening, then his jaw clenched. "Stop lying, Celeste. Stop it." I couldn't hear her words, but I could hear his, and with each one, his voice grew harder. Finally, he slammed the phone down onto the table, his hands shaking. "She's been lying to me, about everything, about the baby, about the house, about you." Tears welled in his eyes, but he blinked them back, his face contorted in anger and shame. "I defended her against you. I believed her over you. God, Mom, what have I done?" I reached for him, but he pulled back, burying his face in his hands. And in that moment, I knew the truth had finally cracked him open. This was the beginning of the end for Celeste, for their fragile alliance, for the lies that had chained him to her. But it was also the beginning of something else. Something I wasn't sure either of us was ready for, because when truth enters, it doesn't heal right away. First, it destroys. Adrian sat across from me, his face buried in his hands, the weight of his shame pressing down like a stone. I wanted to reach for him, to pull him into my arms the way I had when he was a boy after a scraped knee or a broken toy. But he wasn't a boy anymore, and this wound was deeper than any bandage could cover. Finally, he lifted his head. His eyes were red, not from tears but from anger. "I have to confront her," he muttered. "I have to hear her admit it." Fear shot through me. "Adrian, she'll twist it. She'll find a way to make you doubt again." "Not this time," he said, his voice flat. "Not after this. I need to hear it from her mouth." And before I could stop him, he was already standing, pulling his jacket tight around his shoulders. I paid for the untouched coffees and followed him out into the night, my heart pounding as if it already knew what was coming. We drove in silence to the small apartment Celeste had rented after the eviction. The lights were on, shadows moving behind the curtains. Adrian's hands clenched the steering wheel so hard I feared it might snap. When we stepped inside, Celeste was waiting. She looked radiant in her anger, her eyes flashing, her voice sharp. "Where have you been? Do you have any idea what people are saying about us? About me?" Adrian didn't answer right away. He just stood there, staring at her with a look I couldn't read. Finally, his voice came, low and steady. "Tell me the truth. Are you pregnant?" The room went still. Celeste's eyes flicked toward me, then back to him. Her lips curved into a trembling smile. "Of course I am, Adrian. How could you even?" "Stop," he snapped. His voice cut through the air like a blade. "Stop lying." She froze. For the first time, I saw fear flicker across her face. "I am not lying. I can show you." "Then show me," he demanded. "Right now, doctor's records, appointments, anything." Her mouth opened and closed. Nothing came out. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. And then, with a bitter laugh, she dropped her act. "Fine," she spat. "No, I'm not pregnant. Happy now." The words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Adrian's face crumpled, his hands shaking at his sides. "You lied to me," he whispered. "You lied to me about everything." Celeste rolled her eyes. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. I did it for us, to protect us, to make sure she couldn't push us out." She jabbed a finger in my direction. "Your mother wanted to destroy us, Adrian. I just gave you a reason to fight for me." He turned to her, his voice breaking. You made me hate my own mother. You made me throw her out of her home. And for what? For a lie? Celeste's smile twisted, cruel and cold. You wanted to believe me. Don't pretend you didn't. It was easier than admitting the truth about her. Adrian staggered back as if she had struck him. He pressed a hand to his forehead, his breathing ragged. God, what have I done? I stepped forward, my voice trembling. Adrian, but he cut me off, his eyes wild. I don't deserve your forgiveness, Mom, not after everything. I opened my mouth, but no words came. The ache in my chest was too deep, too raw. I wanted to tell him I forgave him, that I always would, but part of me hesitated. Because forgiveness wasn't just words, it was trust. And trust once shattered doesn't mend overnight. Celeste crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. Go on, Adrian, run back to her. See how long she takes you in. But don't forget you chose me. You burned that bridge yourself. Her words were venom, but they carried a terrible truth. He had chosen her. He had thrown me out. He had stood by her side while she lied and lied again. Adrian looked at me then, his eyes desperate, searching. Tell me I can come home, he whispered. The world seemed to stop. My son, broken and bleeding in front of me, begging for the thing I had always promised him, safety, love, a place to belong. And yet, I hesitated. I saw the nights alone in Linda's guest room. The comments from strangers who called me a monster. The image of him standing proudly beside Celeste, smiling while I packed my life into a suitcase. My throat burned. I will always love you, Adrian, I whispered. But I can't save you from yourself, not this time. His face crumpled. He stumbled back, shaking his head, tears finally spilling over. Celeste's smile returned, sharp and mocking, but I barely saw her. All I saw was my son, shattered by his own choices. When I turned to leave, my legs felt like lead. My heart screamed at me to go back, to hold him, to forgive. But my mind knew better. Love without boundaries wasn't love, it was destruction. Outside, the night air hit me like a wave. I leaned against the car, my chest heaving, tears blurring the streetlights. For the first time, I had walked away from my son. And for the first time, I understood what survival really meant. The days after Adrian's confrontation with Celeste blurred together in strange colors, shadows of grief mixed with flashes of liberation. I moved through my house quietly, my footsteps echoing against the familiar walls. Each room whispered memories, but they no longer weighed me down the way they once had. I had thought reclaiming this place would bring back the warmth of the past. Instead, it felt like something different, a blank canvas. The curtains, the photographs, the furniture, they weren't relics anymore. They were choices, and for the first time, those choices belonged only to me. Linda came by with fresh flowers, setting them in a vase by the window. She studied me with her steady eyes. You look different, she said softly. Older? I asked with a faint smile. Stronger, she corrected. I didn't answer. Instead, I watched the flowers sway gently in the breeze, their petals catching the morning light. Stronger, maybe she was right. The world outside hadn't forgotten the scandal. The news still carried whispers of Celeste's lies, though the sympathy she had once commanded had soured into ridicule. Fraud, they called her now. Manipulator. Her name, once gilded in public pity, was tarnished with disgust. As for Adrian, he disappeared from the headlines. No more staged photographs, no more defiant posts, just silence. I tried not to wonder where he was, whether he was eating, whether he was sleeping. Every time my mind drifted there, I forced it back. Love didn't vanish overnight, but neither did the pain he had left me with. One evening, as I sat on the porch with Linda, watching the sky bruise into twilight, she asked the question I had been avoiding. If he comes back, what will you do? The air grew heavier. I sipped my tea, the warmth grounding me. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to open the door. Part of me wants to keep it locked forever. Linda reached for my hand. Maybe you don't have to decide yet. Maybe all you need to do is live, one day at a time. Her words settled into me like seeds. The next morning, I woke before dawn. The house was still, the world outside hushed. I wrapped myself in a shawl and stepped into the garden. Dew clung to the grass, sparkling faintly in the pale light. I breathed deeply, the cool air filling my lungs. For so long, I had lived in shadows, shadows of grief, betrayal, loss. But standing there, with the horizon slowly glowing pink and gold, I felt something shift. The war was over. The wounds would remain, yes, but wounds could heal. Scars could even become reminders of survival. I whispered into the morning, not to Adrian, not to Celeste, but to myself. It's time. Time to rebuild, time to live. Time to let go of the chains that bound me to their choices. The sun rose slowly, and with it, so did I. The sunrise of that morning lingered with me all day. Its colors seemed to stain everything they touched, the curtains, the walls, even my reflection in the mirror. I had lived through storms, betrayals, and battles. Now I stood in the quiet aftermath, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the silence. The house felt different. Not haunted anymore, not hostile, just empty. But an empty house was better than one filled with lies. An empty house could be filled again, with laughter, with new memories, with peace. I began small. I cleared the closet of clothes I hadn't worn in years, packing them neatly into boxes to donate. I moved furniture, dusted corners, opened windows to let the breeze sweep through. Each gesture was more than cleaning, it was reclaiming. This space, once stolen, was mine again, and I would not let it rot under the weight of old pain. Linda visited often, bringing groceries and warmth. Together, we painted the guest room walls a new color, soft sage green. She teased me, saying it was the color of renewal. I laughed, the sound surprising me with how light it felt. Lisa came by one evening, her briefcase in hand. She handed me the final papers, the case against Celeste officially closed. "It's done," she said simply. I ran my fingers over the embossed seals, the signatures. It was strange, so much chaos, so many sleepless nights, all reduced to ink on paper. "Thank you," I whispered. "You don't need to thank me," Lisa replied, her smile faint but genuine. "You saved yourself long before I ever stepped in." Her words stayed with me long after she left. Of Adrian, I heard little. Whispers said he had left Celeste, that their grand alliance had collapsed under the weight of truth. Some said he was living with a friend, others that he was drifting from job to job. I didn't know which was true, and perhaps I didn't want to. One night, though, as I watered the flowers on the porch, I saw a figure standing at the end of the driveway. My heart stopped. Even in the dim light, I knew him instantly. Adrian. He didn't come closer. He just stood there, his shoulders slumped, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. For a long moment, we stared at each other across the distance. My throat tightened, words clawing to be spoken. But before I could move, he turned and walked away. I stayed frozen until the shadows swallowed him. Only then did I let out the breath I hadn't realized I was holding. He wasn't ready. And maybe, neither was I, but strangely, it didn't crush me. It hurt, yes. It always would, but the pain wasn't chains anymore. It was just part of me, like an old scar, tender to the touch but proof of survival. The days stretched into weeks. The garden bloomed under my care, roses climbing the trellis, lavender swaying in the wind. I began writing again, little journal entries, letters to myself. Sometimes letters to my husband, telling him about the battles I'd fought, the strength I'd found. I imagined him smiling, proud of me for standing tall. And slowly I realized, this was life. Not the life I had planned, not the one I had begged for, but life nonetheless. And it was mine to shape. On the first day of spring, I stood on the porch as the sun rose, the sky awash in gold. I wrapped my shawl tighter and whispered into the dawn, "I forgive myself." It wasn't about forgiving Adrian or even Celeste. It was about forgiving me, for the years I let myself be diminished, for the nights I believed I was powerless, for the guilt I carried like a stone. The words left my lips, and with them, a weight I had carried for far too long. I smiled then, a real smile, one that reached my eyes. The war was behind me. The future stretched wide and unwritten. And as the sun climbed higher, warming my face, I felt it fully for the first time. I was free.